attendance. And you, as you are attending the classes, we have the screenshots and we have the screen recordings, and you are filling the feedback link. Please do fill the feedback link, and attendance will be collected from these. Okay. And this is the main thing. As I'm getting more questionnaires regarding the attendance, I want to make it clear that attendance will be taken from the screen recordings and from the feedback links. Okay, fine. And today we have two sessions, and the first session will be handled by the speaker, Dr. N. Pungurli. She is the associate professor from the School of Computer System Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and New Delhi. And today's second session will be handled by Dr. Priyadashini Rajaram. She is a lecturer and program director from the department at School of Technologies at Cardiff Metropolitan University. And her topic is AI and big data integration, leveraging large language data sets for improved healthcare solutions. And we start this first session. I'll give the speaker introduction. And it's my absolute honor to introduce Dr. N. Pungurli, an esteemed academician currently serving as an associate professor at the School of Computer Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Uh, Dr. Pungurli has completed her PhD from Pondicherry University in 2016 and MTech in 2009, and she has over 19 years of teaching experience and 5 years of dedicated research experience. Dr. Pungurli has published more than 30 research papers in reputed journals and international conferences, and along with that, she has three book chapters to her credit. Her contributions extend to three patents that showcase her innovation and expertise in her field. As a passionate mentor, she has guided 50 UG projects, 10 PG projects, and she is currently supervising PhD scholars too. She has also played a pivotal role in organizing faculty development programs, workshops, and conferences for academicians and students alike. Her research include machine learning, cybersecurity, blockchain technology, biometrics, and image processing. She is a life member of prestigious organizations like Computer Society of India, IEEE, ISTE, and the Indian Women Network. With such an inspiration profile, we are truly privileged to have you with us today, ma'am. Please take over the session and give us some useful inputs, ma'am. Thank you so much. I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, madam, for your wonderful introduction. So, good evening to one and all present here. So, I think we can start the session, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So, the topic of today's presentation is predictive analysis in healthcare using AI to forecast patient outcome and trends. So, the title integrates almost all the latest technology and with an big application of healthcare. So currently we know what is going to be the scenario in the healthcare situations and how the pandemic has created the necessity for having this healthcare applications. So in the beginning of the pandemic, we could have seen that we were helpless what to be done for this particular scenario. Later, then we started collecting information back in the 1900s, and we were able to identify some of the precautions and methodology that has been followed to eradicate this disease. So how this was being done with the past experiences. So analytics is something which deals with the past experience and the data and the statistics about the information that is already being available with us. So before even going into how this predictive analysis being included in the healthcare application, we'll just see the basics. So analytics generally refers to the systematic computation. Just a second. That analyze the data or the statistics. So it is a process of using computational methods to discover and report influential patterns in the data. The goal of this analytics is to gain insight and often affect the decision that is being taken. So data is necessarily a measure from the historic information. So by definition, analytics examines the historic data. So this term analytics was predominant because in 2005, the Google introduced the Google Analytics. And therefrom, the term analytics has started flourishing into the researchers. Okay. So data is necessarily is going to be the historic information, and this historic information is going to be collected, and this plays a pragmatic role as the organization collects more data and it is being summarized. Then there is a natural procession towards using the data to improve estimates, forecasts, decisions, and ultimately it should be more efficient. So this is what analytics in general mean. So now we'll see what are the types of analytics that are there. So analytics is being divided into four things. One is going to be the predictive analysis. So we'll be seeing it what it is. Then it is going to be the descriptive analytics, which is analyzing the past data to understand what has happened. And next is the perspective analytics. It provides a recommendation for possible outcome based on the data insights. The next is going to be the diagnostic analysis, which identifies the reason behind the past outcomes. So these are all going to be what has happened and when it has happened and how it has happened. Okay, so now this predictive analytics is a process of discovering interesting and meaningful patterns from the data that is available. So using the historical data to predict the future outcome, it can be described as a branch of advanced analytics that is utilized in making prediction about unknown future events or activities, that is using historical data combined with the statistical modeling, data mining techniques, and machine learning lead to the decision. So this is what is a predictive analysis is. So now our today's topic is predictive analysis in your healthcare. So this healthcare, so the current state of art in the healthcare is going to be discovering new diseases. So this new diseases or predicting or detecting whatever might be the case study or the scenario. So now it allows the health professionals to find the opportunity to make more effective and efficient decision based on the data that is being available, and it also predicts it. So the data that is going to be available in the medical scenario is going to be very huge. So once it is coming to data and very huge, then we need to talk about the big data. So even before going into the big data, we'll see how this predictive analysis has evolved. So this predictive analysis is not going to be a new topic. As I was telling you, the predictive analysis in 2005 it has been more in usage because of the Google Analytics. Even before that, everybody will be knowing about the Lloyd's company. So during 1968, the basic analytics started. So this company, the Lloyd's company was basically a insurance company. So this insurance company was for the sea voyages. So using the data, the company predicts the risk of sea voyages in return for a premium. So these Lloyd company, what they did is that they use a data set of the past trips in order to evaluate the risk of this voyages and predict the pattern of the liability. So this is how analysis have started into the business in late 1960s. Okay. Then Lloyd's continues to use the predictive model in all the facets of their insurance underwriting. And then this idea has become a general practice in the insurance industries. So this is how the basis of analytics has started. Next, so the second stage is going to be the descriptive phase. So descriptive phase is nothing but what has happened. Okay. So in the mid of 20th century, just after the intervention of the computers, the description phase linked the Lloyd company idea of what has happened with the modern computer to create a basic model of linear programming and computational modeling. These models have become the drive for several business functions in almost every industry in the world. So this is how the next phase of the predictive analysis has come. So the third phase is going to be the diagnostic phase. What did it happen? So what has happened? Okay, so in mid 1970s, where the question arises of why something has happened instead of just what happened. Okay, so we were just analyzing why this has happened. So this analysis look for root cause of the and the backbone of several innovation that would improve business function, including optimization and maximization. So it was during this period that the computers made large jumps in storage and processing capabilities, allowing functions to become that are much more effective. Next came the predictive phase, the phase 4. So it was going to be the predictive. So earlier it was going to be if something has happened. So then it was what has happened, and then why did it happen? Next is what will happen. So there was going to be a prediction in the future, what is going to happen. So in late 20th century and the dawn of the 21st century saw the beginning of the predictive phase. So this was during the development of the mathematical model that utilized weighting technique to score data were programmed into the analytical programs. So this allowed the computers to make suggestion and predict outcomes based on the series of input that has been given by the user. Now today, this is a technique being used in predictive index. So that was going to be the fourth phase. So next came the cognitive phase. So cognitive phase is going to be, as everybody know, that we are in the era of machine learning and artificial intelligence, where the system starts thinking. So it is going to be the cognitive phase, which has the machine learning and the future. So with the continuing increasing in the processing speed, innovation in program, machine learning, artificial intelligence, these has created a climate that can allow computers to increase accuracy level in predictive software without human intervention. So this is how the evolution of predictive analysis has happened. And now that we know the cognitive phase is in the progress, and almost every industry in the world is being using the predictive analysis. For example, if you're going to take the weather, so weather, we forecast the weather. So this forecasting now still we can't beat the nature is true. So we expect the rain to be today. I don't know how about the climate in Chennai now. So in Delhi, we have the forecast that we'll be having a rain in this week, but we didn't have it. But we claim that we have the excellent models. The reason why is that the input that we have given based on the past doesn't have the feature set that has been given in the present scenario. So this is why many of the times, mainly in the weather, the forecasting that has been done is not going to be whatever we call to be 99% accuracy, or 98% or even 80% accuracy is not being attained. It is because of the selection of the model. So we'll see what it is in later cases. Okay. So as I was telling you about the big data, so we are going to process based on the historical data. So historical data means that it is going to be the data that we have collected and stored, and we have kept it in the past. So even before something has happened, we just see what has happened earlier. Okay, so that is what the scenario in the current says. We imagine something and we wanted that to be predicted based on the future input that we are going to have. So we generally know what a big data is. We would have come across this term very frequently. So it is to generate and gather more and more data at an increasing space. So this is what you call to be as a big data. So this data is going to be a massive volume of it can be a structured data, or it can be unstructured data, which is very difficult to manage, process, and out of that, it is also difficult to analyze using the traditional processing tools that we have been using late dates. Okay. So now, after the advancement of technologies and all the tools and languages, and even the processing speed, the storage limit that you're going to have, it gives the researchers and the analytics and business opportunity to gain knowledge and the game-changing intelligence. So when it comes to big data, then we have to talk about the V's of it. Okay, so these are going to be the 5 V's. Earlier, when big data was being defined, it was with only the 3 V's, which is going to be the volume, velocity, and variety. Later, then, after even more the data accumulation was being increased, so now we started using the veracity and the values. Okay, so what the volume means over here? So the volume is the sheer amount of data generated every second. This includes data from social media, sensors, transaction-based emails, videos, etc. and etc. So now there is no scarcity of data in any of the field. Whatever field that you're going to take, now you can see that the data is going to be in abundant. Okay, why it is in abundant? Because of the feature that it is going to be high speed and velocity. So the velocity at which the data is generated and needs to be processed. For example, in case of your real-time application in your stock market, you can just imagine what is going to be the amount of data and that is being produced for a single day. So the single date when it is coming to be a stock market, it is going to be from 6 p.m. to evening 6, sorry, it is going to be 9 p.m. to 6 p.m. I hope so. So during this period, so what is going to be the amount of data that is going to be generated from the stock market? So that has to be analyzed and then it has to be processed and you're going to give a critical factor for whatever you have generated. Okay. Then the variety. So the variety of data nowadays, earlier it was going to be all documents. Okay, so we didn't have much variety in the data. When you even see the historical data that you collect from him, everything are going to be a documented data that is going to be there. Then after when the computer has invented and people started digitization, all even these olden data are now being digitized and being stored and they have various formats. Okay, so the formats include such as images, audios, videos, and we even have the traditional data with your text and your numbers and with various other formats. And handling this variety of data is going to be the biggest challenge that we are having now. That is the present era is facing now is how we are going to process these data. So once it is going to be the variety, then came the veracity. So this veracity is going to be the uncertainty of the data that we have collected on how trustworthy it is going to be. So that is going to be the definition of a veracity. Then the value. So once you have identified that it is going to be a meaningful data and it is going to have a trustworthiness. So what is going to be the insight of the useful data that you're going to get it? Okay. So this is how you're going to process your 5 V's of your big data analytics. Now coming to our scenario in the healthcare management, I have just taken the smart ICU that combines all the 5 V's. So we know what ICU is. So when a patient is being admitted, so all his vitals will be monitored 24/7. For example, there is going to be a long period of stay. Then in the initial stage, he will be monitored 24/7. Even it depends upon the vital that is going to be taken. So if it is going to be his ECG, then it is going to be continuously monitored. If it is going to be his temperature, it is also continuously being monitored. And any other lab test that is going to be there, then it is going to be collected and it is going to be. So this is what is going to be the volume of data that is being taken for a single patient in an ICU for a single day. Okay, next comes the velocity. So since it is going to be a real-time data, the two with a critical condition, then the velocity of a data is going to be, as I mentioned earlier, it can be for seconds, minutes, hours, and days together. If it is a long period of stay, then it is going to be with the days together. So now we have the velocity of data. Next is going to be the variety of data. So it is not only from the medical devices that you're going to use. Now, after the invention of your Internet of Things, its data started flooding like anything with all the devices. So nowadays we have your watch, your smart watches, your smart shoes, your wearable clothes also, that is going to give you information regarding your health status to the stakeholders. Next is going to be the veracity. So once you're going to get the data for any situation, then the data accuracy has to be checked, and one of the way is going to have the redundancy in the data that we are being monitored. For example, when we are talking about all the devices that are being connected and the data is being monitored, we even have a caretaker who is also going to give the same information. Okay, so what a caretaker, for example, if it is going to be a nurse in the ICU, she'll also be monitoring the same information. She'll be checking for the temperature, she'll be checking for the blood pressure or her whatever information that is. Again, she will also be recording at her part. So now we are going to have the same set of data, and you're going to have the duplication in it. So all these, whenever they, for example, if the doctor is at the remote place and he is going to access this patient data, so he need not go twice with all the devices that is given and what the data is being given by the caretaker. So now this gives the veracity. Next is going to be the values. So these values are going to be based upon the input that is being received from the patient. So which is going to predict and prevent a complication in the patient who is being admitted in the ICU. So these are going to be the data that is going to be produced in a healthcare sector. Okay, so I have just taken only the case of a ICU patient. We can now imagine. So now, even if you have any elder patient at your home, you could see he'll be having always a bag full of documents. Whenever we want him to take to a hospital, the first thing that he'll be asking is that, have you taken all my documents? So what does it contain? So it does contain all the information or all the records of the previous visit to the hospital. So whenever he goes to the hospital, along with the doctor's prescription, along with the test that is being taken, and along with the bill that he has paid, so every information is going to be there in the document. The same thing here, we have collected the patient information in ICU for a particular period of time. Okay. So now what are going to be the data variables? That is kind of data that we are going to store for a healthcare. So the first thing, whenever we go for a checkup or for any hospital visit, so we'll be giving our demographic values. So it is going to be your name, your age, your sex, your ethnicity, your address, and your socio-economical status, what is going to be a profession, father, and all these informations you will be giving in your demographic values. And this also is going to be recorded along with your health information. Why? Because is that, so whenever there is going to be a prediction, so first we need to, so sometimes it happens that from where you are. So for example, if it is going to be a thyroid problem, earlier, no, when it was going to be thyroid, it was only linked to the, there was this general assumption that people living in the seashore will not be having their thyroid deficiency, but it is not the case because of the lifestyle. So this is why we require all your demographic information in order to even have some good prediction system. Next is going to be the imaging data. So nowadays, whenever we go to the doctor, so doctor first lists some list of tests and scans that has to be taken. Only with the report, we can again go to the doctor and we can have the prescription. So that is going to be the imaging data. So imaging data can be X-rays, CT scans, MRIs, and ultrasound. All these images that is going to be there, that is going to be imaging data. Next is going to be the clinical variables, which includes your diagnosis, your lab results, your medication. All these are going to be the clinical variables. Why we call it as to be clinical variable is that these are all going to be the document that will be produced during their visit to the hospital. Next is going to be the temporal data. So this temporal data are going to be the blood pressure, heart rate, your glucose, and if you're being admitted in the hospital, so what is the time of admission and what is the reason for your admission and who is the doctor who is going to examine you during your admission. So all these temporal data are also going to be stored. Then comes your genomic and your proteomic variables. So now this is going to be even more for a chronic diseases. So whenever we are going, we are being identified with any chronic diseases. For example, nowadays diabetics are going to be very common. So the next question that we are going to ask is going to be our genetic details. So wherein at the later stage we'll be requiring for the DNA sequencing or the gene expressions and all these things. And the last is going to be the behavioral and lifestyle of the variables. So behavioral and lifestyle are going to be the main component for today's almost every disease. Okay, so the first thing is that based on your physical activity. Nowadays, we are very poor in doing physical activities. Then comes your diet system. So we never care for it. We only just wanted to have a delicious food and not a healthy or a balanced food. Next, again, coming to the habitats. So earlier, smoking and drinking were not going to be a habit. It was only people, not even people, you can say. It is going to be very rare case that we can see people smoking and drinking. But now it is not so. We don't know. Now the scarcity is that it is difficult for us to identify people without smoking and drinking. Okay, so this is what is regarding the variable data that you need for a healthcare industry for any predictive use cases. Okay, so once we have collected with the data, now the first part of your V is being now over. So you have collected a data. So what you're going to do with the data? What is going to be the scale of measurement? Because once you have collected the raw data, next step is that you have to process those data. Okay, so then you go for the scale of measurement. How you're going to use the collected data? So this scale of measurement can be distinguished as a nominal, ordinal, interval, and a ratio. So this when come to the nominal, so this scale categorizes data without any inherent order or ranking. So you're not going to have any ordering, but you're going to have it in terms of a label or a name, which is going to be a least sophisticated data type, and it consists of some discrete categories or labels. For example, if it is going to be a gender, okay, so gender in general we'll be calling it is going to be only three. It is going to be either a male or a female or others. So these are going to be the three label that you'll be having for a gender. For example, if it is going to be for a social media platform, okay, so nowadays even your health data will be including with your social media, because this is where your actual data can be gathered. Okay, so it is going to be whether it is a Facebook or a Twitter or a Instagram. So these are all going to be some of the labeled data, which is going to be a categorical data with a nominal scale. So next comes with the ordinal. So this ordinal is also being classified as a categorical data, which classifies data into categories that have a meaningful order. Okay, so this meaningful order is going to be, for example, if it is going to be a cancer diagnosis, so then they label it as going to be whether it is going to be the first stage or a second stage or a third stage, or if it is going to be with a severe pain. So what is going to be the label of the pain, whether it is going to be a mild, moderate, or severe pain. So this is how you categorize the data that you have collected. Next is going to be the numerical data. So numerical data as a, sorry, it is an interval data, which is going to be represented in terms of a interval. So once it is going to be interval, then it is going to have some equal interval, or there can be some differences which is going to be meaningful, and this includes the order data with an equal interval between the values, but there is no true 0 point in this. So there is no going to be any zero value which is going to be arbitrary and does not reflect the absence of the characteristics. For example, if it is going to be a temperature, or a blood pressure. So it cannot be a 0. So there should be some value, and that is going to be the difference between. So for example, if you're going to monitor a patient's blood pressure, then it is going to be from the beginning of the session. So it is going to be somewhere 99, 100, 102, 103. So it goes on. So there is going to be an interval in time, and what is going to be the value to that. So that is what is going to be your interval data. Next comes the ratio scale, which we call to be as again a numerical state, which is most sophisticated data. This has the characteristics of an interval scale, but includes a meaningful 0, allowing for the calculations of the ratio. So here in this case, you can have a 0 value also. For example, it can be a weight. So weight cannot be a 0, but some cases, whatever we are going to predict can be a 0 value. For example, if you're going to have an income, so the income can be a nil value also. 0 income can also be there. So this is going to be a meaningful value with a numerical value. Okay, so these are going to be the scale of measurement for a data. So next we'll move on to the analytics technology stack. So how this predictive analysis is going to work in a healthcare industry. Okay, so as we know, the stack includes your infrastructure layer. So this infrastructure layer main component is to collect the data. So now the data can be with a IoT devices, or from the transactional logs, or any social media feed, or APIs, or even third-party data set can be included to fetch the data from the web services or even some external platforms. So that is what is going to be your infrastructure. Next, we have the data layer, then the analytics layer, and top of it, we have the application layer. So this is the infrastructure layer. So this is going to collect the data. So the data can be, as I already mentioned, it can be a structured data, or it can be an unstructured data, or multi-sources, and it can be a clean data, or you can generate data from multiple sources. And these data has can be of various formats, such as text, image, trajectories in the spatiometer, and all these things are going to be the type of data. So this needs to be at the bottom of the layer to prepare the adequate and high quality data for all kind of analytical demands that is going to be given, or the service that is going to be given to the upper layers in the architecture stack. Okay. Next is going to be the data layer. So the data layer here is going to be mainly comprised of the databases. So this database is going to be, again, as I told you, it can be a complex distributed unstructured data layer, wherein in case of a medical case study, it is going to be the electronic medical health record, wherein even the clinicals have written documents, and it is even difficult for us to understand what it is being used. Okay, so here in case of your data layer, we have the data warehouses. For example, it can be even a Snowflakes, or a Google BigQuery, or an Amazon. So which is going to be a centralized platform for a structured data analysis. Next, we have the data lakes, such as Amazon S3, Azure, or Hadoop. If it is going to be a big data, then we use the Hadoop FDS, which is going to be used for storing raw or unstructured or a semi-structured data. Next, we have the databases, that is going to be the conventional database, or the relational database, MySQL, NoSQL, or MongoDB. So whatever the case, depending upon the application that you're going to use, you can select the database. And we can even have some metadata management tools, which can manage the metadata and ensure the data governance. So these are going to be some of the components that is responsible in the data layer. Okay. So next comes the analytical layer. So this analytics layer is going to be responsible for all the prediction that we are going to make. So here this layer is going to turn the big data into a big value. once we are going to receive the data, now we need to process it. So we have collected various data from various tools and we have stored it. Now the task is to analyze these data. So this analytics is going to have the data pre-processing and the preparation. So here we are going to use a more sophisticated algorithm that is going to meet out the different needs of the use cases that we'll be using. And next is going to be the application layer. So as the application layer, once the model is being built, now it is available for the end users to use it. Nowadays, we have the open source or commercial softwares that is being built to tailor the need of the end user. Okay. So now we'll move on to the predictive analytics architecture. So we have seen what are going to be the stack that is going to be for a predictive analysis. Now how this stack is going to work for us. So as already told you, at the infrastructure layer, we are going to have the data collection. So the data collection, these are for our use case, that is your healthcare application. So these are going to be the sources of data. So this we have already seen. So one is going to be the clinical data, which is going to have the clinical notes and the electronic health record or any other health record that you're going to have is going to be one of the source. The next is going to be the laboratory data, the investigation reports, test reports and all those things. Then we'll have the sensor data, which is going to be IoT based, or it can be any medical sensors that is being used. For example, if it is an ECG, EEG or a BP, then a BP monitor, then it is with the imaging data, CT, MRI, X-rays, or with the genetic data and other data. So the other stakeholder here are going to be, so when we just imagine with the hospital, it is not only the doctors and the patient and the administration that is going to be involved. Nowadays, we could see in a single umbrella, we have all the facilities. For example, if I need to go for a laboratory test, so I need not go anywhere. Now there is going to be a lab facility that is going to be there in the hospital. I can use those services. Next, if I want to buy some medicines, then there is going to be a pharmacy there which is going to serve me for my service. Next is going to be the insurance. For example, if I'm going to have some surgery or I need to have some treatment which is going to be more costly for me, then I can avail my insurance that I've taken. So all these are going to be the source of data, and these are going to be the major information that is going to be stored in health records, or we generally call to be as a electronic health record. Okay. So next is going to be, once the data is being collected, the next stage is to process your data. So this processing of data, we call at this stage as a pre-processing. Okay. So what do you do in the pre-processing technique? So the pre-processing technique is going to be going to play a major role, because only the data that we are expecting should be, because all your model that you're going to train is going to purely depend upon the input that you're going to give. If your input is not going to be the correct format or whichever is going to be required, then the model that you're going to train is going to depend only on that type of input. If you're going to give a good input, then you're going to get a accurate result. If it does not depend on the model, but it depends upon the data that you're going to feed to your model. Okay, so that is why this data pre-processing plays a major role in your predictive analysis architecture. So the first stage is to clean the data. So cleaning the data is going to be, you have n number of methods that is being based on the data that you have collected and based upon the application that you're going to use. So we have the process. Next, you have the data integration. So once the data is being cleaned, then you need to integrate the data. How it is going to be done, we'll see it. Next, once the data is integrated, you have a format, then you are going to identify which data is really required for you and how you're going to use it. So that it is going to be with the data reduction process. The last stage is going to be the data transformation. So data transformation is going to be, you're going to use the data for further process. So that for that particular process, your data should be in the proper format. So all these are going to be the task in your data pre-processing. So first we'll see what we are going to do with the data cleaning. So data cleaning, as I mentioned in the previous slide, it is going to have the missing values, noisy data, and the inconsistency data. So missing value. So missing value, there are many techniques that is being used, because we started with the conventional method, and now we are moving on to the, just a second. Sorry for the interruption. Okay, so now it is going to be with the deletion technique. So in case of a deletion technique, we can go with a list deletion, wherein remove all the rows where there is going to be even a single value. So in that case, you're going to remove the whole value because it has a missing value. Next is going to be the statistical imputation. So statistical imputation is going to take all the statistical values, for example, your mean, median, mode, which replaces the missing value with any of these value. Or we can even use the KNN model for building up this missing value. Next is going to be with your machine learning imputation. So machine learning imputation models includes random forest model, which uses the random forest to predict missing value based on the other features. Or we even have the XBoost imputation model, which uses the boosting algorithms to predict the missing value. Then the next technique is going to be matrix factorization. So this matrix factorization is going to, we have the PCA, which is PCA, that is a principal component analysis method, which is used to estimate the missing value using the PCA, and which reconstructs the data. And in this, we also have the singular value decomposition, which is similar to PCA, but decomposes the data into singular value to estimate the missing value. Okay. Then it is going to be the data specific. So here, when it comes to data specific, it depends upon the data that we are going to input. For example, if it is going to be a time series data, then you're going to fill the missing value by interpolating or using a forward backward filling technique that is being used. Or it can also use the previous or the subsequent value to fill the missing data. So this is how we do it in a data specific. Next is going to be the, we even have the deep learning technique that is being used. In general, we always use the encoders that which trains a neural network to reconstruct the missing data, which is more effective for a high dimensional and complex data. And we also have the GAN, which is a generative adversarial network to model and generate missing value that can capture complex patterns in the data. So these are going to be the various techniques that you can use for building up your missing value in a data pre-processing stage. It depends upon the application that you're going to use. So next is going to be the noisy data. So another big constraint to the data that we are going to have is going to be the noise in the data. So whenever we are going to have a noise in the data, there are again techniques which can eliminate the noises in the data. So one such is going to be a data smoothing. So this data smoothing can be done with the moving average technique, which smoothens the noisy data by calculating the average of the sliding window over the data points. For example, if it is going to be a time series data with a random noise, then you can just eliminate it using your data smoothing. Next is we can also use the exponential smoothing, which decreases the weight of the past data points. Next is going to be your outlier detection and removal. So outlier detection is going to be, we can use some of the methods which are predominantly used are going to be the Z-score, which identifies the outlier based on how many standard deviation of a point in the form of a mean. So this can be used. So in this case, we can just compute the mean and standard deviation of the data, and we can calculate the Z-score of each point and remove the points which are going to be beyond the threshold. This is how we do in a Z-score method. Next is going to be using the noise filtering. So noise filtering, you can use the low pass filters, which removes the high frequency noise from a signal, while retaining lower frequency components. For example, it can be with a sensor or a signal data. Okay. Next is going to be a cluster-based method. So cluster-based method, we know the very common method of clustering technique is using your K-means algorithm, which detects a noise as an input from the far away cluster centroids. Okay, so this can be for a simple clustering problem, and we can also use a density-based spatial clustering, that is a DB scan, which identifies the cluster in the data and label point outside the cluster as a noise. Okay. Next is the data transformation. So data transformation in general, we can use the normalization technique or the standardization technique, which can mitigate the effect of the noise in the data analysis. Okay. So next is the probabilistic noise removal. So we can use a Gaussian mixture model as a Gaussian distribution and separates noise from the valid data. Then again, when coming back to the deep learning techniques, we can use the encoders, auto encoders to remove the noise from the data. Next comes the inconsistency in data. So here the first method is going to be a data proofing. So it identifies the inconsistency in the data set and summarizes the data, checks for the missing value as well as the unique value. Next is the data standardization. So as I already told you, so the data standardization is, for example, to convert all the text in the data to a small case. So that is going to be one standardization. For example, you wanted to convert whenever there is going to be a date. So we have various formats of writing the date or putting it in. Sometimes we put a hyphen, sometimes we put a slash or a dot. So now you want to standardize it by using a hyphen between the date, the month and the year. So that is one process of standardization. Next is going to be your duplicate handling. So duplicate handling is that identify the duplicates using any of the hashing technique or equality comparison. For example, in case of a fuzzy duplicate, we'll be having Muhammad. So Muhammad will be referred to as MD also some cases. We could have seen people writing for Muhammad as MD. So in this case, now you are going to have a fuzzy duplication and you are going to replace the values with the similarity measures. Or sometimes we also use the domain specific rules to add or remove the particular information. Next comes the inconsistency categorical value. So this inconsistency categorical value may be mapped with the dictionary methods. We can use some dictionary methods, which is similarity based method or automatic map generation. So using all these methods, you can just have your cleaning process being done. Once the data is being cleaned, then the next stage in your data pre-processing is going to be the data integration. So data integration here is that, as already mentioned, we have n number of sources where you're going to get the data from. So it can be from, it can be, for example, the hospital can be from the same hospital, or it can be from the same department, or it can be from various hospitals, or it can be even from various countries. So these are going to be the data set that you're going to have. Now you need to do the integration process. For example, if I wanted to identify a patient is going to be with XYZ disease. So now he is going to take the clinical notes as well as the laboratory report. So laboratory report is going to be maintained by somebody else. So now this is going to be the integration that you're going to do. So in this case, we have a schema integration, we have a semantic integration, we have a entity resolutions. So entity resolution is going to be, you're going to have a label. So in that, for example, if it is going to be identification of a particular disease stage. Okay, so at some cases we'll write this to be what is going to be the severity, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Sometimes we refer to something as a rank 1, rank 2, rank 3. So now there is going to be an entity dispute. Now we need to resolve it. So this is also being done in your data integration. Next is going to be the data consolidation. So data consolidation, as I already told you, whenever you're going to conclude a process. Okay, so for that you are going to take from n number of sources that you have taken, and there you are going to consolidate the data. Then it is going to be the integration of your structured, semi-structured, and your unstructured data. All these things you will be doing it in the data integration. And the data is a data federation. So when your data is going to be accumulated at a particular place, then you are going to federate the data, and you're going to process it. So these are going to be the data reduction techniques. So these data reduction techniques, I'm not going to talk in depth of this. So we know the data dimensionality reduction. We have your principal component analysis, your LDA or autoencoders, and you have the selection methods, which includes your filter method, wrapper method, embedded method. And sometimes we also use the sampling method, random sampling, stratified sampling, and under and over sampling. So these are going to be the various data reduction technique that will be applying on your data that you have collected. And sometimes we also require data transformations. So data transformations, it is also depending upon the application that you're going to use. So this data transformation technique can be scaling down, or you're going to normalize the values, or it is going to be an encoding categorical data. For example, if you're going to have the gender, so gender, we generally use a male, female, and others. So now you want to categorize it as a male to be as 1, female to be as 2, and the category, others to be as a 3. So now you are going to do some encoding process in the categorical data. Next, you are going to have your discretization, logarithmic, exponential, and power transformation. So all these are going to be some of the data transformation, which is going to be applicable based upon the case analysis that you're going to do. Next is going to be your feature extraction. So once you have cleaned your data, so you collected your data, now next that you have cleaned your data, now you're going to extract the features from the data set that you're going to have. So this feature extraction can be statistical feature, or it can be based on the frequency and time domain, or it can be with your text data feature. So it depends upon the feature that you're going to extract. So these features are generally classified in terms of a text data and a image data. So your medical data has a heterogeneous data, as I already told you. It is going to have some numerical values. It is going to have some image data. So how this is going to be used for the predictive models? So now in case of your text data, the model that you're going to have is going to be the regression model. So this regression model is going to estimate the relationship between the dependent and the independent variables. So when in case of a hospital management system, so the patient data, wherever you're calling about to be the demographic data or the case history, so all these are going to be the dependent variables that you're going to have. And when you're going to have the pharmacist or the other stakeholders, then you are going to have it has to be as an independent variable, which is going to be used. Next, the type of data that you're going to have for your predictive model is going to be the time series data. So this time series data, as I already discussed in how the time, that it is going to have the intervals, equal intervals or a meaningful interval is going to be as. So this is going to be based on the historical trend that you're going to use. Next is going to be the decision tree. So decision tree data is going to be, you're going to have the classification model that predicts the categorical outcome. So you will be having some labels that you're going to have, and which is going to be a supervised learning for you. Next is going to be a clustering model. So clustering model, as we know, it is going to group the similar properties. Okay, so these things are going to be based on the similarity in the features that you're going to have. Next is a rule-based method. So these rule-based method rely on the predefined logical rules that are going to have a statistical learning. And another method that is used for your text data is going to be the anomaly detection. So anomaly detection is going to be the unusual patterns in the data that we collect, that we recognize it and we name it to be as an outlier. So these are going to be some of the predictive model that is being used for a text data. Next, we'll see what are going to be the models that is being used for an image or a video data. So, as already mentioned, there is going to be a heterogeneity in the data that we are going to collect. So one of them is going to be an image. So whenever we talk about the X-ray, CT images, scans, everything are going to be in an image or a video format. So there are going to be many techniques that is being used now, depending upon the cases. So in case of a medical scenario, we use the models that is there available. So this data are being involved in deep learning technique, or whether it is going to be a computer vision or artificial intelligence. They are mainly used to analyze, classify, and predict the patterns in the visual data. So one of the most frequently used method is going to be the convolutional neural network. So convolutional neural network are going to be the backbone of the image and video predictive models. They extract the spatial features using the convolution layer and the pooling operation. So that is going to be the functionality of your convolutional neural network. So this convolutional neural network has the convolution layer which extracts the spatial features using some filtering technique. Okay. Next, it has a pooling layer which reduces the dimensionality while preserving the important features. And next is going to be the connectivity between the layers, which fatten the feature map and makes a prediction. So this is how a convolution neural network. And now we could see the CNN are being developed for based on the application. So the earlier CNN model were just used for digit recognition. Now we have the AlexaNet, ReLU, VGG16, VGG19, ResNet, MobileNet. So all these methods are used for mainly for image classification or object detection or a facial recognition. So it depends upon the application that you're going to use. Next, we have the recurrent neural network. So this recurrent neural network is while in case of your CNN, it captures the spatial features. Whereas in case of your RNN and your LSTM, it captures a sequential dependency, making them ideal for a video analysis. Okay, so the key features of these methods are it is going to be a memory retention, that it keeps track of the past frames for the context, and it handles sequential data which predicts a future in a video sequence. So these are going to be the key features of these two models. Next is going to be the transform model for a vision. So this, as the name itself mentioned, it is going to be for a vision. So it uses the self-attention mechanism to process entire image as a patch instead of convolutional layers. So in case of a convolutional layer, it is going to have, we are going to divide the images into layers, whereas here you are going to have it as a self-attention mechanism. Okay, so in case of your transfer model for vision, you can have better long range dependency in the images, and it is applicable for a large scale data set. Okay. Mainly we can use it for your medical image analysis in case of a tumor detection in a MRI scans. Okay. Next, the method is going to be your generative adversarial network. So this generative adversarial network composes of two networks. One is going to be the generator. The other one is going to be the discriminator, which is going to complete the generating realistic synthesis over the
Ma'am,
image
excuse
for
me,
the
ma'am.
videos. Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, your screen is not changing.
Is it changing now?
Ah, yes, ma'am.
Because I'm talking over this slide only.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
Sorry, ma'am.
Okay. So next is going to be the autoencoders. So these autoencoders are going to be a neural network that is being used for unsupervised learning, mainly for image denoising and anomaly detection. And next is the object detection models. So these object detection models are mainly used to identify and locate multiple objects within an image or a video. So these methods now are being even used by small children to just detect the objects. Even in case of your mobile, if you could see, whenever we are opening the camera, your face is being detected. So this is because of the YOLO, that is you only look once. So which is going to be a real-time object detection method, or a faster CNN or a SGD method can be used for object detection models. Next, we have the spatio-temporal models for video prediction. So this is mainly for use for the videos application. So we use the 3D CNN or a convolution LSTM models to have this. So these are going to be the various predictive models that is available, and which all the models that I have selected over here for the discussion is mainly which is going to have a good efficiency and an accuracy. So we later on see how this accuracy and efficiency can be attained. Okay. So next is going to be the model evaluation. So now that we have collected the data, we have processed it, now we have identified the model which we are going to build, and now we have got the output. So your deployment stage is also finished, and now you are going to check if your method is going to give you the expected output. So now we are going to do the process of your model evaluation. So evaluation is that we all know, as most of us are going to be in a faculty community, we evaluate other students. Okay. So when you do evaluation, it is a process of judging on their merit. Okay. So how good is, how bad he is, or how excellent he is, or it is going to be worth for something. So based on something, we'll be just measuring how it is going to be performing. Okay. So the main reason for having your evaluation is to build an effective and an efficient data science system, or your modeling system, whatever we call to be. So these model evaluation can be done using a, generally we do it in a controlled environment. We know what is going to be. So in case of earlier conventional systems, we were expecting the output, whatever the system was giving the output, we know that we concluded it to be as a correct. But now in present scenario, we have the output with us. But now we need to know whether the output that you are going to have is going to be more efficient, or whatever is expected. Okay. So why we need an evaluation? Okay. So since we have seen n number of models in every stage, we had n number of algorithms, we have n number of technique that can be used. Now we have to decide which is going to be the best one. But deciding which is going to be the best one, no algorithm is going to be the best for a particular case study. So it depends upon the type of data, as I already mentioned before. So your model training is going to be based only on the data that you're going to, if you're going to give the meaningful data, then your model will be predicting you the expected outcome. If your data is not going to be of the standard or of the requirement of your system, then it is not going to give you the expected outcome. So it depends upon the input that you're going to give, and it also depends upon the model that you're going to choose for your case study. Okay. So these are going to be the assessing models for your evaluation. So how to evaluate the performance of a model? So we were talking about there are going to be n number of metrics that is going to be there to evaluate the performance, and there are going to be many methods for your performance evaluation, and there are many methods for your model comparison. So how we are going to do, how we are going to evaluate the performance of a model, how we are going to obtain the reliable estimates that we are expecting, and how to compare the relative performance of the different model. So for this, as we know, we have the performance metrics. So if it is going to be a regression or a classification model, then we are going to have the nominal or a continuous output that you're going to get. Okay. I'll just skip this. Okay. Now we'll talk about the overfitting and the underfitting process. So once we are going to train your model, once you're training your model, so you're going to train the model based upon some criteria that is going to meet the satisfy. So during that time, there is a possibility of having a overfitting and a underfitting of your data. So when it is going to be a underfitting, then there is going to be a high bias and a low variance. So now you could see in this graph, the blue line shows is going to be the model that you are used, and the samples are going to be towards the true function. Okay, so it is going to be highly biased and it has a low variance. So the increase in the number of features or the complexity of the model. So whenever there is going to be a underfitting, then there is an issue of complexity of the model. And next, coming to the overfitting. So now in the graph, again, you could see the blue line is going to be the model, but the samples are going to be towards a true function. Okay, so now there is a low bias with a high variance. So getting more training data. So when you, even we know, so we should have a balanced diet. If you're going to overfeed, then you're going to have some problem of obesity. If you're going to underfeed, then you're going to have the problem of some deficiency. So the same thing is over here also. So getting more training data or reducing the number of features is also going to increase the complexity of the model. So now we should choose a model in such a way that it is going to have a good balance. That is, it is going to have everything is going to be with the true function and the testing that you are going to do. So this is what is going to be the issue of your overfitting versus your underfitting. So since we are talking about large big data, large data set, so how you are going to train your model? So sometimes some use cases will have a large volume of data. Some use cases will be having a smaller use cases of data. So how you are going to train your model? Okay. So if the data is going to be large, then you can go for a simple evaluation technique wherein you are going to split your data into 2/3 or 1/3 or 50/50. So you can just split your data. So you can just, now in this case, if you could see. So this is going to be one of the evaluation model of you're going to have a data when you're going to split the data into a training set and a test set. So your training set is going to be based on the past knowledge that you know. Okay, so based the whichever value that you know that you're going to keep it as a training set, and now you're going to test the test with the new data set. So this is one way of testing your. So the second step is you're going to build a model based on the known data set. Okay, so first you're going to have your data set. You're going to again split it into training set and your test set. And this training set is going to be based upon the known data that you'll be taking it from the past, and you'll be building a model, and then you'll be testing it. The third test step is going to be evaluate on the test set. Okay, so here you're going to have a training set which is going to be again on the known results, and you're going to have a testing, and you're going to have a model which is going to be built, and now you have the prediction, you have the predicted values. Now based upon the predicted value, you're going to evaluate your model. So this is what is going to be. It depends upon the, again, as depends upon the data set that you're going to use, and depends upon the application that you're going to use. Okay. So now the challenge lies between your data tuning. So when you're going to have your parameter that is going to be tuned, you'll be having it either going to be as a basic structure, or you can use the optimizing the parameters. So when you go for this proper procedure, then you'll be having a training set, you'll be having a validation data and a test data. So validation is mainly used for optimizing your parameters. So in general, the researchers take with this training, validation and a test data to have a better optimization results. Okay. So when it is going to be in case of a small data, so small data, again, you're going to have for an unbalanced data set, or it can be So in this case, you cannot go for either 2 by 3 or 1 by 3. For a small data set, we can go for the cross validation. So this cross validation is that you are going to split your data set into k equal subsets. And this k, generally the k value is going to be a tenfold test that is being oftenly used, and it yields a overall error estimate. Okay, so this is going to be an example of the cross-validation test. So we have divided the data set into equal sizes, and these equal sizes we have taken the test and we are going to repeat it until then you are going to get a better result that you have expected. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, your 10 cross validation. So sometimes we don't want to have the cross validation, then we go for the bootstrap method. So this bootstrap method is going to sample without the replacement, wherein you're going to have your sample data set, which is going to be n times with the replacement to the form a new data set. So now you can see here it is going to be having the hold of our data set. So you're going to have your training data, you're going to have the validation. So here you're going to use the k cross verification, whereas in this case it is going to be your bootstrap. You have going to select the n instances, and based on that you're going to do the testing. Okay, so the next performance metric that you're going to have is going to be your precision and your recall. So precision and recall are going to be with the number of data that you're going to do it. So this is going to be basically made calculated using your confusion matrix. So this confusion matrix, I hope you will be aware of it. So you're going to have a true positive, true negative, false positive, and a false negative. So based on this, you can calculate the accuracy. So we know what an accuracy is, but this often any model that you're going to use will not be complete if you're going to use an accuracy. We can claim that it is going to be 99% accuracy. So in case of 99% accuracy, how it is being calculated? It is based upon the positive and negative values that you're going to give. For example, in this case, if you're going to see, the accuracy is going to be 91%. But this often is not going to tell the full story whether your class is going to be, if it is going to be with a imbalanced data set. Okay. So for that, we again go for the other metric, which is going to be F measure, which is going to be a harmonic mean of whatever we are going to calculate it. So one is going to, that is, we are in a previous case, it was either going to be the recall or the precision. So here you are going to take both the recall as well as the precision, and this is going to even give emphasis over the small values, which is going to be affected by the outliers. So here your data are going to be extremely skewed over, which is not appropriate for your accuracy measures. So now we have the other metric, which is going to be a ROC curve. So these are going to be the various cases of a ROC curve. So the first graph is going to tell which is going to be an ideal situation, and it is going to be preferably between the positive cases and the negative cases. Okay, so your ROC curve, if it is going to be so, then it is the distinguish between the number of negative cases and the positive cases. The next diagram shows what is going to be the worst situation. So worst situation is that it is going to have a random prediction of either it is going to be a positive or it is going to be a negative. The third diagram is going to be the area under the curve, that is your ROC, indicates how well the this indicates how well the class is being separated from the negative and the positive. So whenever you're building your model, so now your ROC curve should be in this form. Okay. The same way we can have multiple models to be evaluated. That is, I was talking about the comparison between models. So now you can build your ROC curve for all the models that you are going to build. So in this example, if you could see the green line is towards the bad model, because it is going to be with the 50-50, that is either positive or a negative state. Then it is going to be, the next is going to be, okay, somewhat good model. Then the last, the blue line is going to indicate that it is going to be a good model. Okay. So this is how you are going to calculate the area of conduct curve. So this, all these techniques is going to indicate you the model that you have built is going to give you the expected output. Okay. So again, it is not that we have come to an end of the evaluation, but there also might be cases which is going to be in a hypothesis testing. So in case of a hypothesis testing, we are going to have the null hypothesis or a alternate hypothesis, which is going to test whether the gain weight is on an average. Okay. So for this, we are going to use two tests. One is going to be the t-test and your other one is going to be the p-test. So this is how we are going to evaluate the model. So next we are going to see what are going to be the applications of your predictive analysis. So we have n number of applications. I have just selected the predominantly used application use cases in your healthcare. One is going to be the disease prediction and prevention. Okay. So it is going to be for a chronic disease management or a cancer prediction or any infectious disease outbreak. For example, if it is going to be a COVID. So now earlier we didn't expected for a pandemic diseases. But now with a large set of data and with all the sophisticated models, it is now easy for us to even predict that is, if this is going to be the scenario, then what is going to be the future. Okay. Next, most application that uses a predictive model is going to be the patient care and monitoring. And next, the upcoming is that the personalized medicine. So it is going to be based upon the treatment plan, on the genetic profile and the historical data, a patient is going to be cured. The same way is also going to be the drug response prediction. And we have the operational efficiency, which is going to be the various stakeholders, that is the administrators of an hospital uses this operational for the operational efficiency. Then we have the public health, wherein we can predict the outbreaks that is going to happen in the future, or the what is going to be the high risk data that is going to be providing. Okay. So next we'll see how AI powers the predictive analysis. So the first one is going to be the data processing at a scale. So the data processing at a scale, now the healthcare industry generates enormous of data from medical records, patient surveys, wearable disease, and other tests. So now AI can shift through this data at a scale and speed would be impossible for humans to identify these patterns and anomalies that indicates the potential risk. Okay. So the next is going to be the improved accuracy in the risk prediction. So now with the AI models, it can predict the likelihood of disease outbreaks or the progression of the chronic condition with increasing precision. Okay. So these, for example, this AI-driven predictive model can forecast which patients are at risk of heart attacks by analyzing the combination of the genetical and behavioral and the medical data. Okay. So next is going to be the integration of multiple data sources. So as already stated, there are going to be huge sources of data, the diversity in the data, lifestyle, environment, genomic. So all these are going to be the various integration of data sources. Next comes is the, as I already told you, so the upcoming health industry will be more towards a personalized predictive, preventive care. Okay. So now moving on to the benefits of AI-powered predictive analysis. So, the main motto of our session today is going to be the patient outcome. So, patient outcome with the predictive analysis, it is to provide with the ability to intervene before a disease fully manifests. Okay, so this approach can prevent complication, reduce the severity of the disease, and improve the overall quality of the patient. Next is going to be the cost saving of healthcare system. So we know now how much we spend for our health in a day-to-day life. Okay, so even just to have a hospital visit, we need to spend a lot. By having this uh, good predictive models, which is going to be care-driven analysis at a substantial cost can be done. For example, if you're going to have an early intervention of high-risk cardiac arrest, then we can prevent the cost of an emergency visit. Okay, so we know already that there is a prediction of a cardiac arrest. So based upon that, we can take some uh, predictive measures, or we can even go for an early visit to the doctor. All these can be done. As I already told you, next is going to be the personalized healthcare and the operational efficiency. So this operational efficiency is where the model can predict the patient volumes, or allowing the hospitals to allocate resources efficiently, and reduce the waiting time of the patient, because now in our country we could see the patient is to hospital staff ratio, either it is going to be the nurses or the caretakers or other things, are going to be not up to the standard. But in future, if we are going to use this predictive model and we are going to consider these outputs, then there is going to be a good healthcare in our country. Okay, so the next will be just ma'am, can I continue with the case study? I'll just give the overview of the case study. Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Yeah. So now moving on to one of the case study. So this healthcare, as I have already told you, there are a number of applications, but now in almost over the globe, so the unscheduled readmission are posing a significant health risk and escalates the care cost. Okay, so this is one of the biggest problem that we have globally. And when coming to India, so the hospital readmission is gaining the momentum, especially for the chronic diseases like heart failures and the post-surgical cases. But here in our country, the challenge is that we don't have a proper data set. Either it is going to be the follow-up summary, or the social determinants, or the affordability, or the accessibility is going to be challenging for us for the hospital readmission, but it is now gaining the momentum. Okay, so what do you mean by hospital readmission? Okay, so whenever we know, as a women, if we are hale and healthy, so the admission will be only during your delivery or your pregnancy. So that is what, so if you could see, even if we are going to talk with our mothers or our grandmothers, they'll be telling only this scenario. Even our grandmothers will be telling that they have never went to the hospital. But now the scenario is not so. So every one or two people are going to be now admitted in the hospital. So now there is a chances of the hospital. There are many factors for readmission. We'll see it later. So what is going to be the readmission time frame? Okay, so it can be for a 24. You are being discharged. By the next 24 hours, there is going to be an admission, or it can be for a 48 hours, or it can be for a 72 hours. The short readmission terms are going to be either 7 days or 14 days. The standard readmission, which most of the researchers have been taken, is going to be that 30 days. Next, it is going to be the medium-term readmission. Either it is going to be 60 or 90 days, a long readmission, 6 months or 1 year, or sometimes it is going to be the condition-specific readmission wherein you are going to have. So as I already told you, the standard readmission timing is going to be 30 days. So why this 30 days is going to be a benchmark for this evaluating hospital quality and patient care is that it serves as the time frame to assess whether a patient returned to the hospital shortly after discharge due to complications, unresolved issues, or inadequate follow-up. So the reason for this standard readmission is going to be the clinical relevance. So it is being so whenever we want to go for a hospital checkup, so within the first 30 days of your discharge summary, they'll be asking you to visit the hospital. After 30 days, you have to visit. So that is going to be the clinical relevance. It depends upon the condition of the patient. Okay. So in general, if you're hale and healthy and you want to have a revisit to the hospital, then they'll be just mentioning to be as a after 30 days. That is after 1 month, you can come and visit the doctor if you are going to have any complication. And even if you're going to be healthy, then also you can just have for a general checkup. That is what is going to. Next is going to be the practical time frame. So this practical time frame of 30 days is going to balance between the identifying issue related to the quality of the care and the external factors that are unrelated to the hospital. So this is sometimes is the practical time frame. Next is going to be the standardization across institutions. So this 30 days standard is widely accepted metric for hospital performance, making it easier to compare institution and other quality of care consistently across the different healthcare system. Then for the policy and reimbursement, as one of the stakeholders are going to be the insurance. So now various bodies such as HRRP or your HL7. So all these are going to recommend this 30 days as a readmission time. Then focus on the traditional care. So this focus on the traditional care is going to be the first 30 days after discharge are critical for ensuring a smooth transition from hospital to home or another care setting. Okay. So this readmission within the period often point to a gap as a transitional care, such as poor communication or insufficient follow-up or lack of patient education. Okay. The next is going to be the research evidence. As I already told you, so in most of the cases for the readmission, they are taken it as to be as a 30 days. So it is proved that 11 percentage of the people who are being admitted are coming back after 30 days. So this is the reason why the standard readmission date has been time has been given with the 30 days. So next, these things already we have discussed. So it is going to be with the electronic health records. So whenever we are going to devise a healthcare system, so the data that is going to be the input that you're going to give to your model is going to be a electronic health record, which is going to have all the sources of data that I have already stated is going to be there in your health EHR. So the online, the publicly available data set, because this clinical data set are not being maintained properly. No, I cannot tell that it is to be properly maintained, but it is not publicly available. There are many hospitals and many countries who are going to have their medical records, but they don't give it for the research purpose, or it is not publicly available. But this MIMIC 3, that is the third version, is a publicly available data set for the researchers who wanted to do on the healthcare system. They can take the clinical data from this data set for their research purpose. So it contains the de-identification of the health. That is, we don't have the the data set doesn't disclose the identity of the patient, and it includes the clinical data, time series data, structures data, and it is freely accessible. So this is a model that I have, this is AI driven diagram. So this I have generated for the MIC with a random forest. So this is going to be the tree that is going to be built with all the predicted features, and there are going to be n number of trees. That is going to be the random forest, and the tree which is going to have with the proper feature set, which is going to give you the correct output, that is the expected output, is going to be with the accurate prediction model. So what could happen in the future with your predictive analysis is that, so this will be your predictive analytics in future. So now you have the patient who is going to be around all the medical gadgets, and the doctor is going to be somewhere away, and all the caretakers, all the professionals, medical professionals are going to be there, and you are going to collect all the data, and you're going to give a predictive analysis at the less and more efficient. Okay. So that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for giving us a brief introduction and an extensive explanation regarding the predictive analytics. And you have also give some insights regarding what are all the AI tools that are being used for what specific purposes and all. We thank you on behalf of this Rajalakshmi Institute of Technology for your nice presentation today. And ma'am, we have a few questions by the participants. Let me read them. The first one being, how much data being stored is helpful to resolve complication in chronic diseases, ma'am?
So here is going to be the a volume of data. That is, the question is pertaining to the volume of data. So as I
Yes.
already told you, whenever you're going to give an input, so whenever you're going to train your model, it is not going to be, you have to decide what is going to be the size of the data. It depends upon the input type that you're going to give. So we cannot decide what is going to be the size. So in general, we know that whenever the data is going to be uh, more, then your prediction accuracy is going to be more accurate. When your data is going to be minimum, because you're going to train a set with only the minimum data set, so your accuracy cannot be more. So it doesn't depend upon the size of data, but depends upon the quantity of data that you're going to have, on which you're going to train your model. I hope I
Okay.
have answered the question. And what is genomic, proteomic, and metabolics? Okay, so all these are going to be more related to scientific terms. So uh, these informations are going to be collected based upon the uh, test reports. For example, if it is going to be a genetic, so we are going to have your genome operation, and you're going to extract the gene array. That is, your gene array will be extracted for a specific case. So in that case, you will be analyzing your data, and you will be giving your results. So metabolism is going to be the hormonal changes that you are going to have for your particular your body, or with your health condition. I'm not very much confident about all these type of data.
Okay. Ma'am, we do have one more question, that is differentiation between the bootstrap and
Bootstrap uh,
cross
and
validation,
the
ma'am.
cross validation. Okay.
Yes.
So your bootstrap is also going to be one of the cross validation techniques. So in case of cross validation, as I already told you, you can divide your data into k subsets. So general, the k value is going to be 10. So you're going to have, suppose if your data size is going to be 1000, then you can just divide your data set into 100, and you can use the cross. That is, you can have your test data same data can also be used for your training also. So that is what is going to be your cross validation. Whereas in case of your bootstrapping, you don't have a sample already. Okay, so you will be repeating the process.
I hope the participant might understand that explanation, ma'am. We do have one more question that you have told about the data set, right, ma'am? The MIMIC.
Are required. And that is what I told you. No, it is going to be a freely available
Free.
data set. You can use it. It is open source. You can just access it.
Okay. And Sridevi ma'am has asked, is there any other similar publicly available data set available like this, which you have specified that MIMIC? Is there anything else available freely?
Why I have taken this MIMIC? Because you have many data set which is pertaining to a specific disease. For example, if you want to have for a diabetic, then you have a diabetic data set. But this data set, which is going to be a clinical data set. So clinical, when it comes to a clinical data set, it is going to have all the informations. Okay, so mainly this is going to be with the heterogeneous data set. That is, it has a clinical notes, it has all the other test reports and patient care or their admissions, readmissions. So this is going to be the kind of data which is going to be with your MIMIC. But in case of your medical data set, you can have, there are n number of data set. But for a clinical data set, this is the only data set that is available. There
Okay.
are data sets, but they are not publicly freely available.
Okay, fine. Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Participants, do you have any more questions to clarify with ma'am? Yes, ma'am. I do find one more question from Sajan Francis. He's saying that he's doing his PhD in cardiology related project, and based on the trend in biomarkers, planning to predict the outcome in future. But the sample size is too small, so is it possible to use machine learning? The problem is he has very small size
Yeah,
sample
that is
size,
what
so
I already told you. So your model is going to be based on the size of your data and the type of your data. If the size of your data set is going to be small, then your model will not produce you the expected output. So
okay.
then then applying a machine learning requires a large data sets. That is why we go into machine learning.
Okay, fine. Is there any other question, participants? I do not find any other question, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for the nice presentation. I once
Thank
again thank you to give us some useful insights, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, I also thank the coordinators and the management for giving me an opportunity to connect you over online for this Atal FDP program. So I wish you all success for the forthcoming days also. And thank you participants for having a patience in listening to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Now I invite Malati ma'am to introduce second speaker to the participants.
Dr. Priyadarshini